So I'm going to go over Lab 3 for the AWS Academy Cloud Fundamentals course that we're doing here at Hawking College. We kind of missed it last week because I've been sick, still am a little bit. So just bear with me, for the coughing and the weird voice. I'm always a big advocate in taking notes. So this is just a tip for me. So what I did on this lab is I went through the lab, and the lab should be fairly quick. It didn't take too long. I went through the lab, and then I just got done taking notes. And even though I have my certification for this course, and even though I've been playing with it for a little while, I still always learn something new every time I, do a tutorial, whether it's prep to teach a class or just do it for my own personal need or curiosity. And note taking, I cannot stress it enough. And maybe it's just me, but I don't think I'm totally alone in this. I think there's a lot of people that are probably very similar. Like if I read it, especially when it's a lot of tech jargon and stuff, even though I think it's really interesting, if there's not a way for it to be tangible for me, whether just something like writing it down, I just read it and I skim it and I'm like, and I need something to make myself slow down and develop a better understanding of it. So again, that's me, and that's my recommendation. It does take longer, but this is a field that pays really, really well. And you need to have that mentality of being a lifelong learner. And this is just how it is. I tell my students there's no magic wand, there's no magic fairy dust. You just got to do the work. So here's the lab. We're going to be doing building a VPC and launch a web server. So in this lab, you will use the Amazon VPC to create your own VPC and add additional components to produce a customized network. So I want to be pausing off and on this because I don't want to cough in front of you guys when I try to. So, okay, I'm back. And add additional components to produce a customized network. So we're also going to create security groups for our EC2 instance. And then we would configure and customize an EC2 instance to run a web server and launch it into the VPC. So as I'm doing this, I'm also going to take notes because I'm going to try to create a Kahoot quiz. Let's see. So Amazon VPC, Virtual Private Cloud, enables you to launch AWS resources in a virtual network that you define. So this virtual network closely resembles a traditional network that you could operate in your own data center. So one of the beauties of the cloud is the fact that you don't have to invest thousands and thousands of dollars and somebody to know how to put it all together, in-house. You can just do it virtually, which is basically somebody else's computer and somebody else's data center that people will take care of it. With the benefits of using the scalable infrastructure on AWS, you can create a VPC that spans multiple availability zones. Availability zones is basically a geographical region where there's at least 2 data centers in there. So I'm going to pause this again now. Okay, I'm back. So the scenario that we have the internet, which, the internet, and then we have the internet gateway, and then, which we'll talk about a little bit about that as well. And then we have a virtual private net cloud. So this is what we're going to build again. And there's 2 availability zones. You'll see there's a availability zone A, availability zone B, and talks about the route tables. So this is what we're going to be covering over this lab. So it says it takes about 45 minutes to complete. I don't think it quite took me that long. But we're going to go ahead and access it by clicking Start Lab. I'm going to pause this while that's starting because it takes a few. So you'll see that your lab will be in creation, and it will look like this in creation until it's done. Okay, now it says it's ready. So let's go ahead and close that. And then we're going to click on AWS, and it's going to open up an AWS lab or AWS console. Close out some of this stuff. So this is the console. And so on the top right-hand corner, it should say Voc Labs user, yada, yada, yada. This is the lab that we're using for this practicing. And so there's not going to be any kind of charge to your personal AWS account if you do have one. Let's see. And I am going to, it is kind of cumbersome having one monitor. But you know, you kind of make do with what you got. So I separated it and I put it in another window. I've hit Alt Tab. I don't know how many things I have open. I'm always horrible having things open. See? Hit Alt Tab. It can take me back to the instructions. Pause it. Okay, I closed a couple of things. I'm going to hide that too. Okay. So I do hit Alt Tab. Okay, and it takes me to the console. Again, you can do side by side. I think I've done videos like that before, and it just depends on your preference. I like the Alt Tab if I can remember the instructions, but we'll see how this goes. Okay, Alt Tab goes back to the instructions. Okay. So create our VPC. So in this task, we're going to use the VPC wizard to create a VPC, and internet gateway and 2 subnets in a single availability zone. Okay, so it talks about internet gateway. It's a VPC component that allows communication between instances, which is basically just a virtual computer that you put out in AWS, between instances in your VPC and the internet. So after creating a VPC, you can add subnets. Each subnet resides entirely within one availability zone and cannot span zones. If a subnet's traffic is routed to an internet gateway, the subnet is known as a public internet. If a subnet does not route to the internet gateway, the subnet is known as a private subnet. Public subnet, it means that it's routed to the internet gateway, so there's no barriers, so to speak. And private subnet, there is some limitations, and you have to go through another channel, which we'll get into. But just be aware there's a public subnet and a private subnet. So the wizard will also create a NAT gateway, which is used to provide internet connectivity to the private subnets. So if it's a public subnet, it goes right to the internet gateway. If it's a private subnet, it has to use the NAT gateway. Okay. Okay, so we're in the ADET. We're going to go to the management console, and we are going to, in the services, click VPC. So hit Alt Tab, and I'm just going to search for VPC. Okay, hit Alt Tab, go back to my instructions. So on the services, okay, so click Launch VPC Wizard. Launch VPC Wizard. Go back to the instructions. In the left navigation pane, click VPC with public and private subnets. VPC with public and private subnets. Select. Let's go over this before we're just going through all this. So in addition to containing a public subnet, this configuration adds a private subnet. So this first one right here was VPC with a single public subnet, no privates. With this one, it can have a public and a private subnet. This configuration adds a private subnet, which instances are not addressable from the internet. So instances in the private subnet can establish outbound connections to the internet through the NAT gateway, which is Network Address Translation. So it creates a 16 network, I don't know how to say that, with 224 subnets. Public subnets use elastic IPs to access the internet. Private subnet instances access the internet through the NAT gateway. There are hourly charges for NAT devices apply. So we have the internet, S3, all that stuff. And then we have the virtual private cloud, which is this big square. Then we have the public subnet and the private subnet. So, and then we have the NAT gateway in between. Okay. So, okay. So let's go back to the instructions. Click select to then configure. Okay. Select. So I'm going to go ahead and do this side by side. Okay, let's see. So click select and then configure. Okay, we did that. So the VPC name should be Lab VPC. So let's look at this a little bit. It says IPv4 CIDR block, and I actually didn't know what CIDR stood for. I had to look it up, and I forgot. It stands for classless inter-domain routing. Okay, now we know. And again, there's 600, and there's all of that number of IP addresses available within this. So we don't really get into IP addresses and what they mean and what they stand for. But there is a finite number of IP addresses that are available within an IP4. So that's why there's like, the new standards are coming with IPv6 version 6, because there's more IP addresses available. So just there's like all these numbers kind of change, depending on your IoT devices and everything and anything that has a way to hook up to the internet. See anything from a smartwatch to our smartphone to our computers to our smart fridges to whatever. Okay, there's an IP address. And there is a finite number. I mean, you can only do so many numbers, incrementals. So that's why the new standard is coming with IPv6 version 6, because there's more numbers available. That's not really within the purview of this lab, but there is a resource that I thought was pretty interesting, and I'll share at the end. That kind of goes into a deeper dive of IP addresses that might help cement some of the stuff in your mind. So back to our instructions, lab VPC, the availability zone, select the first availability zone. So availability zone, we're just going to select the first one. Public subnet name, public subnet 1. Okay, so I need to put a 1. So, and then for the availability zone, we're going to do the first one again with the private subnet name. Okay, so what we did here, there's the public subnet for IPv4. It says there's 251 IP addresses available, and this kind of goes back for the same reason up here. So this is for the public, and this is for the private subnet. So we both got them in the first availability zone, and we both have a name of private subnet 1 and public subnet 1. So for the Elastic IP allocation ID, click in the box and select the displayed IP address. So click on that, and that's what's displaying, so that's what we're going to click on. Create VPC. Okay, so that was done. Click OK. Let's see. The wizard has provisioned a VPC with a public subnet and a private subnet in the same availability zone. So I'm going to click on this right here just to give me a little bit more space. And let's see. So this is giving you like a visual of what this table is. Okay, so we have a name. This is what we just created. I'm not sure what this is. Okay, this is the one that was just created. And the VPC ID, it's got the IPv4. Let's see, there's not an IVP6 on it. Okay, So basically, here's the internet gateway, and then we have the virtual private cloud. Okay, so we only did one availability zone because remember I just said just to click the first, in the drop down. We're going to do another availability zone here in a sec. But there's two subnets. There's the public subnet and then there's the private subnet. Okay, so that's where we're at right now. Says the public subnet has a CIDR, which again stands for classless interdomain routing. Again, I had to look that up. Has a CIDR of 10.0.0.0/24, which means it contains all the IP addresses that have that. Okay. The private subnet has a CIDR of 10.0.1.0/24, which means all the IP addresses start with that. So basically you can see, if it's got a 0 in the next to the last number, then it's a public. If it's got a 1 the next to the last number, it's private. So we're going to create additional subnets now. Okay, so in this task, you will create 2 additional subnets in a second availability zone. And the reason we want a second availability zone is to have high availability of our resources. One of the advantages of utilizing cloud technology, no matter what brand, is that they have a higher degree of availability of your resources to the user who's trying to access it, whether it be a website, a form, whatever. There's a higher availability and less prone for it to be unavailable. So in the left navigation pane, select subnet. So I'm going to open this back up by clicking on that little arrow right there and click on subnets. Create subnet. All right, yeah. And then we're going to do the name of public subnet 2. And the VPC is going to be lab, which, yeah. Okay, the availability zone is going to choose the second one because we're creating a second availability zone. So we're going to use this one. The IPv4, see that right there, is going to have this. 20 with periods, yeah. Okay, so the subnet with all the IP addresses will start with the 2. So up here, they start with the 0, the 1, and then the 2. Okay, and hit create, I'm assuming. Yep. And then hit close. So now we're going to create another subnet for the private. So the name tag, just going to copy and paste, maybe, or not. And choose lab and second availability zone. And then there we go. Make sure there's no spaces in the front or in the back. Okay. Hit create. Hit close. So, okay, we have 2 availability zones. The first one, we just finished creating our second availability zone. This is the first availability zone A. So again, if it's a public subnet, it's 10.0.0. whatever. But basically the biggest defining thing here is that last 0. And the private subnet, again, and it's still the first availability zone, it's got that 1. And we just created a second availability zone, and it's going to have a 2 and a 3. So now we're going to click create and close. We did that. You will now configure the private subnets to route the internet bound traffic to the NAT gateway. so that resources in the private subnet are able to connect to the internet. So this is private, so, but we still want the resources in the private subnet to connect to the internet. And for that, we use the NAT gateway. But we also keeping the resources private. So we do this by configuring the route table. A route table sets the rules, which are the routes, and that are used to determine where network traffic is directed. Each subnet in the VPC must be associated with a route table. The route table controls routing for the subnet. Should have bought cough drops. I don't know how this is going to go in class. So the route table, you couldn't really see it earlier because I had this smaller. This is the route table, the public route table, and then the private route table. Let's go ahead. Where are we at? Okay, right here. So the route table contains a set of rules, which are called the routes, and that are used to determine where network traffic is directed. Each subnet in a VPC must be associated with a route table. The route table controls routing for the internet. So in the left navigation pane, we're going to click Route Tables and select the check mark and where it says the main, yes, and VPC equals lab VPC. So we got 2 yeses. I think it's here. Yeah, okay. So you have to expand this, and I think it actually says that. Yeah. So we got lab 2 lab VPCs. Well, the one that says yes, which is the first one. So click on that. Okay. I want to make this up a little bit so you can kind of adjust the size of how this looks. I'm going to do that. Not that, just that one. Okay. Routes tab. This is where we're at. Okay, number 18. We're in the routes tab. Note that the destination is all those zeros. Okay. Is all those zeros, and is set to a target of this NAT right here, which is, again, this is for the private. Yeah. Yeah, this is going to be for the private. So this is why it's going through a NAT, because it's the private subnet. So the destination, I'm trying to remember. I think this pretty much basically means any IP address anywhere. It's like a generic IP address. This means that the traffic destined for the internet, okay, which is set as that, will be sent to the NAT gateway. The NAT gateway will then forward the traffic to the internet. So anything that has a destination to the internet, which is that IP address right there, it's going to go through the NAT. And again, this is for the private subnet. So the route table is therefore being used to route traffic from private subnets. We'll now add a name to the route table to make it easier to recognize in the future. So, okay, so right here, under the name, again, this is main, yes, and it's a lab VPC. We're going to click on that, and we're going to name it private route table. In the lower pane, click the Subnet Associations tab, and you will now associate this route table to the private subnets. So there's 2 private subnets. Remember, there's 2 private subnets. There's the 2 different availability zones, A and B, that we created. So we have 2 private subnets. Edit subnet associations and select the checks for private subnet 1 and private subnet 2. Oh, right here. So there's private subnet 1 and private subnet 2. We're selecting both of those. And okay, click save. So we will now configure the route table that is used for public. Okay, so unselect that one. And this is going to be lab VPC main, no. Let's see. So we're going to name it now the public route table. And let's go ahead and click on the routes on there. So it's still the same destination to the internet. And then this internet gateway is for the public, so we don't need to have any kind of barrier or a mediary, a mid person like the NAT gateway. You can just go straight to the internet gateway. So like it talks about the destination, this to the internet, and the target is the internet gateway. This means that the internet bound traffic will be sent straight to the internet through the internet gateway. Let's see. Okay, so now we're going to go to the subnet associations, edit subnet associations. We got the publics right here. And let's see, click save. So that was a lot easier. Was there less steps? For some reason, I was thinking there was less steps. Maybe not. Okay, same amount of steps, just different ways of doing it. Yeah. Don't really have any more than that. Just need one's private, one's public. The routes, depending on, so here's the public route. It's going to the internet and it's going through the internet gateway because it is public. There's not really a mid person, so to speak, with the NAT gateway. And then for the private route, again, the destination is the internet, but it's got to go through the NAT gateway first. And what we did on these subnet associations, we just put it, we just connected the dots, so to speak. So we now, at this point, this gives us a visual, have two availability zones, availability zone A, availability zone B. Let's see. So again, the internet gateway. This is the virtual private cloud that we were just kind of the whole point of this particular lab. And we have two availability zones. There is a public subnet and a private subnet for availability zone A. The biggest difference here is that fourth zero right there for public subnet 1, which is an availability zone A, and private subnet 1 has this 1 right here, 10.0.0.0. So 10.0.1.0. So it has that 1. And for availability zone B, the second availability zone, the public subnet 2, it has the 2, and then private subnet 2, it has a 3. Okay, and here's the route table. So for the public, the destination of basically the internet of all of the zeros, you can just access it through the internet gateway, like right here. And the private one, if it wants to access the internet as well, it's got to go through the NAT gateway. Okay. Yeah. So now we're going to create a VPC security group. In this task, you will create a VPC security group, which acts as a virtual firewall. When you launch an instance, you associate one or more security groups with the instance. You can add rules to each security group that allow traffic to or from its associated instances. So let's go ahead and open this up again. No, it was open. Where am I going to? Security groups. All right. Did I mess this up? Oh, there it is. Security groups. Okay, click create security group, select group name it web security group, and description, enable HTTP access. Lab, we're choosing the lab VPC, hit create, close. So now we're going to add a rule to the security group to permit inbound web requests. So if you see the name we just did, web security group. So that's the one we want. Click the inbound rules. Inbound rules. Click edit rules. Click add rule. And we're going to add the rule of a type of HTTP source anywhere, which is basically what all these zeros represent. Description is permit web request. And save rules. Let's close that. So now we're going to launch a web server instance. So click on, we're going to go to EC2s now. Services. Click on EC2, which is right under compute, or you can do a search. And we're going to click launch instance right down there. Launch instance, right? Yeah. Okay. Again, what an EC2 is like an online computing power. And we're going to choose this one. And we're going to let that stay where it's at and click next or whatever it is. And let's see. Okay, so configure. Okay. In the network, we want the lab VPC. And then this. Configure these settings, yeah. So network. Oh, there it is. Lab VPC. Public subnet is public subnet 2. Is the one we're wanting. And we're going to auto assign a public IP, enable. And let's see, I didn't have to expand mine, but you might have to expand yours, the advanced details on the bottom. And just copy and paste this. So this script will automatically, looks like this is PHP. I don't know anything about PHP, so don't ask me about that. But just basically we're following the instructions here. And we're going to click add storage. And then we're going to click on add tags. We're going to add a tag of key is name and value is web server 1. Next. Okay, it comes up with a warning, which I think is fine. Rules that with source of the open internet allow all IP addresses to access your instance. We recommend setting security groups to allow access from known IP addresses only. Oh, let's just go with the instructions say. Okay, so on step 51, it says select an existing security group. And it was this one, I'm assuming. Yeah, for the web security group. This is the security group you created in the previous task. It will permit HTTP access to the instance. Click review and launch. Okay, warning, you will not be able to open this instance as the AMI requires ports 22 to be open in order to have access. So it talks about that in here. Just click continue. Review the instance information, click launch. Let's see. So we have our instance type, which is what was by default whenever we created that AMI. This is security group. What's what we named it. This is what the description does. And let's see, it's open, pretty much open internet on this, which is fine. Good for the exercise. Click launch, I think. Review the instance. Okay, click launch, yes. And we are going to select an existing pair. Wait a minute. And to select an existing key pair, choose. And to select an existing key pair dialog. Oh, okay. Sorry. Click I acknowledge. I guess we're just leaving that as is. Or not. It won't let me. What am I missing here? Cancel. I did something. I don't know what I did. And now it's just being weird. How do I get it back? I can't. I'm going to pause this. I don't know what. Okay. It just started acting funny. So let's try this again. Launch. And the select existing key pair dialog, which is right here. Select I acknowledge. Okay. Messages, I don't know, it's being funky. Okay. And and then click view instances. Wait until the web server 1 shows 2 out of 2 checks passed in the status column. Okay, so here's the status column, and we're just waiting for it to say 2 out of 2. I want to pause this. Okay, it's been a few minutes, and it says 2 out of 2 checks are complete. And let's see. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Get rid of that. And there we go. So we're going to copy this IPv4 address, which is right here on the bottom. Click on that. It says copy to clipboard. And then I'm going to open up a new browser tab right there, and then right click and click paste and go. And it shows open a new, okay. You should see a page displaying the AWS logo, which is right there, and instance metadata values. So there it is. The complete architecture you deployed is this, again, the internet gateway. Here's the VPC. We got a VPC created, and the internet is accessing that VPC through the internet gateway. If it's got 2 availability zones, to make sure it's got high availability for our end users. It's got a public subnet 1 and a private subnet 1, and availability zone A and availability zone B. It's got a public subnet 2 and a private subnet 2. Hold on. Okay, so I'm back. Okay, so we see that. We got that done. And we got 2 availability zones, like I said, and here's our route table. And so if it's the private one, it's going through the NAT gateway. Public goes straight through the internet gateway. So that's pretty much the lab. Oh, I'm going to go back to here because I was talking earlier about how IP addresses. And so this is the document for, close that. Wait for this to come up. That's the document for today. And I recommend it, this. There we go, be a link. This particular YouTube video.
A small unit of measure, and within these packets are additional information, not just those addresses, but hints as to what type of data is in the.
Okay, so this is from CS50, which is a really popular program from Harvard to teach computer science skills, and I'm a big fan of it. And it's actually CS50 for lawyers. And the CS50 program for lawyers, you don't have to want to be a lawyer or whatever, but it was like a different way of teaching it. And I just thought, in some ways, I thought the understanding was a little bit better. It could be just me, I don't know. But I think it's around the 7-minute mark. They start talking about IP address like that, just those numbers, like the 10, 0, 1, 0, whatever. Starts talking a little bit about that around the 7 and then 7-minute mark. And then, he actually goes into actual IP addresses and describing that. This whole video is a little over an hour long, but it explains it really well. So I recommend watching this, and it goes over other things regarding internet technology and how things work. So I really recommend watching this video, and because it'll just help. It'll help reinforce what you're learning. Okay, so that's pretty much this video for this lab. And if you have any questions, let me know. I apologize, I sound horrible, but it is what it is. So see ya.